Hi, I'm Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Christy, and we work with Globe International.
Working with missionaries, we hear stories of the struggles, the humor, God's goodness, and a little side of crazy.
Hey, that's who we are.
This is Crazy Missionary Stories.
Hello and welcome back to Crazy Missionary Stories. Today we are talking with Ken and Becky Holderman, who have been in ministry for 41 years. So guys, will you tell us a little bit what you're currently doing in ministry?
We are currently working in member care at Globe, and we work primarily with Latin American, the Spanish-speaking missionaries. We have visited most of them in person, on site, and we enjoy being able to relate to the people that they're relating to.
Yeah, so I know there's a reason why you are working with mostly Latin countries. Will you tell us how you got into member care and why the Latin countries?
We went out in 1983 to Venezuela to pastor a small congregation. And during that time, we didn't have any member care. And there was times when we felt very alone. We had other missionaries from other organizations, but basically we were by ourselves. And so we felt a need for, when we came back to the States in 1990, that we needed people, that missionaries needed other people in their corner. So that's when we started to do member care, but not with Globe, but with another organization. And that was Mission to Unreached People Group, which is now Act Beyond. And we basically visited during our vacations to people from China. And we visited them in Thailand and in Malaysia for member care retreats.
Wow. So when you started working in member care, did that organization already have a member care department, or were you kind of part of starting that there?
They had one person that was kind of a pastor for their missionaries, and he was overloaded.
I bet.
And actually what happened, there was a local, in the region where we were living, there was a missions conference for churches all around, different denominations. And while I was visiting their display, trying to find out if there was a way that we could help out missionaries, I met a man who was in charge of one ministry, and he wanted to know what experience I had. And so I said, well, I had been a missionary pastor, to differentiate between missionary agriculturalists or that kind of thing. And he got excited because he thought that I was a pastor to missionaries. And that's what he was looking for. And so we thought, well, our first mission was a denominational mission where they paid for everything and they made all the decisions. And so we didn't have a support base yet at that time and didn't think that we could do that. And yet I volunteered to write letters of encouragement to some of the missionaries just to help out in what way I could. And then felt like I really needed to do more than that. And so I went to one of their retreats. The people working in China couldn't meet in China because it was a closed country. And so we would meet them when they came out during their main holiday, Chinese New Year. They'd come out to Chiang Mai in Thailand, and we'd have a big retreat. And so we started attending those retreats, and then I brought her along with me. And as we started doing these things, then they began growing their member care department, and we had some trainings and things like that.
So am I correct in understanding that when you first started the member care, then it was kind of on a misunderstanding that you were missionary pastors?
Yes.
Yeah. That's curious. Yeah. How funny. So did you love doing it?
Yes.
I'm guessing. And it started by you writing letters then. That's pretty just a simple way. Did you get a lot of response back from people when you wrote letters, or how was that?
We had our very first start was for people who'd gone out from our home church. We wrote to the family and got this big long letter back. Don Kripe.
In France then?
Yes.
Wow.
And he was so surprised that a complete stranger would write to him and care about their ministry. And so then when they came back on home leave, they purposely wanted to get together with us and find out more about who we were.
Wow. So just for backstory, I was raised in the church that they were sent out of, and Don Kripe, goodness, they have kids my age, and I remember them going to France. And I mean, he still lives in France, so he and his wife were lifetime missionaries there. And so, yeah, that's really neat to hear that part of your story. Another thing that you mentioned there that I'm curious about is you said that when you first went out, you went out under a denomination, so it was a different church, and they paid for everything, so you didn't have to raise your own support.
No.
So you now, being Globe missionaries, you raise your own support. You've lived both sides. Can you share with us? Because I know, like, as a missionary, that's one of the hardest things is raising the funds. But you're mentioning that when they paid for everything, when the denomination paid for it, you didn't have the supporters. And having the supporters and the prayer support, the team around is a big thing. So can you just talk about the differences there and maybe pros and cons? Or your take on it for you guys? What was that like?
We still had to visit churches, and it was still in the 1980s, it was still one of the main ways that you got support. And so churches who were supporting the mission board that we were under would expect us to come through and speak.
So you would come back for how long to do support raising?
You got 3 months
3
after
years.
3 years.
Okay.
You also mentioned you didn't really make any of the decisions when you were not having to raise your own support. So how does that balance?
I don't know if it does.
It sounds very different.
It was different, and we were planning to live the rest of our lives in Venezuela. And so to be told that they didn't need us anymore there
Oh, wow.
was difficult. The regional director who made that decision was a Puerto Rican who felt like there were enough Latin Christians, Latin pastors, that they should be supported and not bring North Americans in.
Yeah, which is really what we want, and you want the work to be sustained by the nationals. Yeah. So really what you were doing was a success then.
Yes, I consider it success now because there's people in our church that we had in Venezuela that are pastors and missionaries and all over the world.
Wow.
And so I can't look at it as because we came back, it was not a good thing. God has his plans in different seasons of our life, and I look back on it from a different perspective right now. You know, there's been time and healing from some of those difficult times. One of the things that happened, he came back for that year to go to seminary so that he could go back and institute a Bible Institute. And during that time, I had been out of nursing. I'm a nurse by trade, and during that year, I decided to go back into nursing. So I see God's hand through all of those changes in my life. Yeah, it was a challenge.
Yeah,
in that first
transition
year.
is hard. Transition, and that's part of what you're talking about is just accepting now we're leaving from the field and we're going back to the States, and that whole, did you have someone walk with you through that transition? You were alone in that?
No.
Yeah.
So it was a difficult time in our lives, and I felt like even the community that we came back into, they didn't understand who we were and what we had been through. So it took a while, and I still feel like, I still feel displaced, let's put it that way. even though I have friends and stuff in the community I live in, it's still, I think, the world. And
Missions is in your blood.
finishes in my blood. Yeah, and I care about the world. But I see God's hand in the whole thing with me being a nurse, because for 13 years when we were back in the States, I visited moms and new babies in their homes. And those were mainly Hispanic moms and babies. And because I had the language because of Spanish, and I understand the culture because I gave birth in Venezuela, I could understand the differences in the cultural things that happened.
So you had a layette ministry, right?
Yes, and I had a layette, and your mom helped with that layette ministry.
She crocheted a lot of stuff and gave that as well for the blankets, and you had clothes, all
Yes.
kinds of stuff, right, that you'd give the moms?
Yes.
Yeah, so the church, the local church was very involved in that, which I think is really, really neat. That's a part of what you brought back with you and included the church and the local church body in that ministry. That's really neat.
That is so cool. Well, I love to ask people this when we talk with them. I'd love to hear about how you guys felt the call to missions.
Growing up as a child, we always had missionaries come through the area, and my parents would have them over for a meal. Or, in fact, my father's first cousin was one of the very first single women that was sent out by our denomination to Africa. She was instrumental in helping put the Swahili language into writing, and then she would travel around Tanzania giving out or selling books and teaching how to read. And then we would always, there were young men several years older than me who had gone to alternative service to Africa or to South America, and we'd have a map in the kitchen that we could pray for these missionaries who were out. And so it was just, and I had an uncle that was in Argentina for a while, another uncle that was in Fairbanks, Alaska. So there were connections all along my growing up years.
For me, I became a believer when I was about 11 or 12. And then when I went in my college years, I went to Urbana Missions Conference, and I feel like that was the start of my call for the world.
Because of what you heard there?
Yes.
Or? Wow.
Yeah, and the different booths and stuff like that. But I knew when I was going to be dating somebody or I got married, they had to have the same call that I did. And so that was one of my requirements on my list of who I would marry. They had to have the same call for missions.
So how did you two meet?
I was working at a summer camp for children, church summer camp, and I was on staff there, and then she came as camp nurse. And when she arrived, it was raining, and so she had a robin egg blue slicker with a hood, and the blue matched her eyes. Then I fought with myself for a while to decide if I liked her or not.
Have you decided yet?
At the end of the summer, I said, "You haven't seen the last of me."
And I grew up in Long Island, New York. My father was a Baptist minister. So it's a very far away from Indiana. But one of my best friends in college, she and I prayed together, and she invited me to come out and live with her after college. So after I graduated, I moved to Indiana to become a nurse. And then she got married, and so I had to find other places to work and stuff. And I wasn't spirit-filled at that time, and so I went to a spirit-filled church, and there was a call on a Sunday morning for a camp nurse, and so then I went to camp. I felt the stirring of the Spirit to go and to be a camp nurse.
And so that was like every summer for a few years, or just that one summer? So then how did you stay?
Yeah.
Because she had to find a different place to live after her roommate got married, she found a place in the town close by. She was in Goshen, And I was living with my parents yet in Dunlap, in Elkhart. And so it was easy for me to go over, and actually it helped that she needed some painting done in her apartment.
Oh, you were very helpful then.
And I was helpful. And I was a bit shy and hesitant about things. And so it helped that I had a reason to go each evening to go paint at her house. And then when the painting was done, I kept going.
You just had to check and make sure it was still up, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
So that was in 1979, and we got married in 1980. And then we were planning to go to the mission field. And so with this organization, we were going to go to Hong Kong. During that year time, they said that there was another person who was interested in going to Hong Kong, and they were of Chinese descent. So they picked them over us.
And we thought that God was shutting the door to missions. And so we had worked in camps before, so I sent letters out to all of the denominational summer camps and found a job in Pennsylvania.
We moved to Pennsylvania, from Indiana to Pennsylvania. And we were supposed to go out and get more people to help, at the camp and stuff. And things changed in the leadership at that camp. And then you started painting, right? And I was pregnant with my first child.
3 days before our first child was born, I lost my job. And I couldn't beg, borrow, or steal a job. I was willing to do anything. Fortunately, we had a good young adult, young married group at church, and groceries would show up on our front doorstep. Someone would have me cut firewood for them a few days, or another guy from our group had a construction business, and I mixed mud for putting up cement block walls, but it didn't seem like anything would open up. And so I started praying and asking God, what is it that you want me to say yes to that I've said no to? And the only thing I could think of was that we weren't looking at missions anymore. And so I thought, well, the worst that can happen is that they'll turn us down again, but I'll check it out just so that I know that that's one more area I don't need to look at. And they had an opening that seemed to match us in Venezuela. Neither of us are rural, and so we figured there were a lot of relief jobs and agriculture jobs, but there might not be many for urban people like us. Well, they had one that needed some help in a small, struggling church, and they were looking for missionaries in Venezuela. The day, my birthday actually, in January, that we said yes to going to Venezuela, I got a phone call. We hear you're looking for work. Wondered if you're still looking.
Wow.
And the job was just a temporary one for several months.
Oh, wow.
I made more per hour there than I had previously. And we got all of our debt paid off before going to the mission field.
Amazing. Wow. So you knew, that was it.
Yep.
Just astounded. God is good.
That's awesome. So you have your baby, right? And then, so when do you go to Venezuela?
He was 9 months old when we went to Venezuela.
So how was that, taking a little baby to another country?
Very interesting, because the missionaries that were there, they took us to this big, it's called a quinta, which is a very big house. And we had a baby, and we only knew hola. We didn't know any more Spanish than that. And the next morning we got up, and we went to this big grocery store, and they said, get everything you need, and, no phones or nothing like that. And we got stuff, and then they went on vacation for 2 weeks.
Wow.
So that was our introduction to,
Sink or swim.
yes.
Wow. So how did you guys learn language?
We found a language school that was basically teaching English to Spanish-speaking people, and they were willing to take us on with a tutor. to teach Spanish to English-speaking people. And we were actually the first people to complete their Spanish course. It was just in the neighborhood, and so some of the time we tried having the teacher come to our house. We tried getting babysitters, and they would just strap our son into the stroller and let him sit there the whole time we were gone.
Oh no.
And we tried daycare, and our son got bit on the back
Oops.
by one of the other kids. So it was challenging.
Goodness. Sounds challenging.
And it's not always good to have husband and wife taking language from the same class. Becky, why don't you speak as good as your husband?
Oh no! Did they really say that?
Yes,
That's hard.
because he had French. So he already knew French from his time in Belgium. That's why you were so good.
You had a good foundation. Yeah. And you were starting from zero.
I was starting from zero.
Wow.
In fact, in New York, we have to take this test for Spanish, and I was failing in Spanish. So, God, why did you send me to Latin America? I had to speak Spanish.
It's God's humor, huh?
Yes.
Wow. So how long did it take you to complete the course?
After a year, we had to move because the missionaries were leaving, and so we took over their position. And so I told the mission board after 3 years that I could hardly speak when I went to the grocery store, or no one would understand how I talked. So I said, you got to send me someplace that my Spanish is getting better, or I'm not coming back.
Did you have any funny situations with messing up your language or?
Well, people just get me this blank look. You know, what are you talking about? You know, because you go to market with my kids in the strollers, you know, and trying to
They just didn't know what to say.
I didn't know what to say. It was awful. I felt very isolated and very lonely, and it was a very difficult time. As a mom, I had a 3-year-old and a baby, and learning the language and the people in the church trying to talk to me, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. Wow.
And the previous missionary couple, she was a Spanish major.
Oh, wow. So it was a very different situation.
Yeah, so they expected Becky to be the same.
A lot of fuel for you to gain experience on how to help somebody on the field as member care. Yeah.
So during your time in Venezuela, what type of ministry work were you guys doing?
I was pastoring and helping in a Bible Institute and being the main mission representative for the country.
Oh, wow.
Because there were no other missionaries there.
Wow.
From our organization.
And I was being a mom.
So you had your second baby in Venezuela?
Yes, I did.
How was that?
Very different from my first one in the States and my second one in Venezuela. We found a clinic an hour and a half from our home, so we had to go over the mountain to go to the clinic to get, my checks and stuff like that. And I knew I was in labor, but they didn't think I was in labor. So we laid our 2.5-year-old down for a nap, and we went over the mountain to the clinic, and I told the thing, I think I'm in labor, and they said, well, I don't think you are. And so they did, gave me Pitocin and things like that to make it, and 45 minutes later, Mark arrived.
That's crazy.
That was something.
Did you say, see, I told you so?
But the things that are so different in the public hospitals and the clinics are very, very different.
At least I was able to be there for the birth because there was a clinic and the doctor had studied in Boston.
Oh, so are you not usually allowed in the room there?
No.
Wow.
No, because the women are all together in one room.
Everybody labors in one room and everybody delivers.
It's very different in
Yes.
the public hospital, yeah.
Wow,
Yeah, nothing like our
interesting.
private rooms here, and the family or friends or husband can come in, and yeah.
But they gave me the baby, and then they whisked him away.
Oh, really?
And we didn't see him until the next morning. And nobody came into our room for that whole night, 12 hours. And so I told Ken, you cannot leave me here, because he knows stuff about OB because I worked in OB. Because if I needed anything, he could help me.
As far as the language?
As far as the language or anybody, nobody came in the room.
Somebody to go look for a nurse even.
Oh my goodness.
So what were you thinking during that time? Like,
That would be pretty scary, wouldn't it?
I would be like, am I ever seeing my baby again?
Yes, I was really scared.
Oh my goodness. I cannot imagine that. So when they brought him back, what was the reason they took him away?
They didn't say. I didn't know until I've talked to people recently and say, if a baby is born at this hour until this hour, they won't bring your baby back to you.
Really? That was kind of how it turned out.
Yes.
Wow.
They just keep the baby in the nursery.
Yes. So, it was
So that's part of the culture that you
Yes.
just weren't aware of.
No, I had no clue.
Again, sink or swim.
Yes. And then our son, poor guy, I feel so bad about that. You know, we left him and he didn't know these neighbors or whatever, and he was there all by himself. You tell him what happened when you...
Wait, he was with the neighbors?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the people...
There was a family living upstairs that went to our church. So they knew the kids, they knew him. And so when he woke up from his nap, they were there and we weren't.
Oh, poor thing. He just didn't know why. He didn't
And it
understand.
wasn't till the next morning at church that I got back from the hospital to get him and take him along back with me. And he was sitting quietly and calmly up in front until he saw that I was there.
And then he got upset.
And then he was very sad and happy all at once.
Oh, poor buddy. Was he happy to have a baby brother?
He was happy to have his family.
back.
Yeah, to not be alone.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of Ken and Becky Holderman. Join us next week for the continuation of their Crazy Missionary Stories.
Thank you guys so much for listening to Crazy Missionary Stories. If you are listening on Spotify, don't forget to follow us and give us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, and of course, share it with your friends. Thank you guys for listening. See you next time.